This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Lessons Learned. And Lessons Learned is about talking to other people to find out what they've been through in their lifetime, whether it's, they're young, middle age, older, doesn't make a difference. We all learn different things. And I've been lucky enough to meet Michele Samit on, boy, I'm not even sure how we met Michelle. We have some friends um, in common, and I started following you on Facebook, and wow, I just connected. You were saying all the things that I wanted to say, um, but I wasn't finding my voice. So I'm so glad that you're here, and tell our listeners a little bit about, who you are, and then we'll get into some of the lessons you've learned.
Well, I'm a writer. I used to be a journalist, and I, after I got married and had children, I started to write so I wouldn't have to go into the newsroom every day. And I'm really lucky to use my journalism career and my journalism training to write because I write all true stories for Lifetime, HBO, Netflix, a lot of memoir based. Um, Historicals, true crime. So I get to use my interviewing techniques. It's a really great career for me because, writing can be very lonely alone behind your computer. And when you get to interview real people, it's kind of, you get both parts of your brain to use. So I'm really fortunate to be able to use my journalism training in my writing.
And I noticed some of that on your Facebook posts. You are very careful how you word things, which some of us,
Sometimes.
well,
Some,
sometimes. Um, but I know this has been a real struggle for you. I mean, the pandemic's been a struggle for all of us, but uh, you live in beautiful Southern California, and you live on the water, and um, you like being out and about, and it's not really safe, being out and about without wearing a mask and being extra careful. Um, and you've talked about that a lot on Facebook, which I appreciate that you have, because so many people are like sort of hiding behind the screen saying, oh no, I'm doing just fine. But the reality of it is most of us aren't. We're just getting through each day. So you've had some lessons in your life, and give us an example of something that maybe has shaped you one way or the other.
well, I think I've learned so many valuable lessons about um, loyalty and faith and commitment and all kinds of things throughout my life. But the one that, when you were bringing up the topic of lessons learned, the one that resonates for me every day and has changed the way I live my life, but that has become particularly important during the pandemic and during these hot political divided times, has been a lesson I learned from my dear friend Eric Edson, who was my former writing partner. I met him, he was a professor. I met him after I wrote my first book. I went to take a class at UCLA because a producer called me and he wanted to adapt the book. And I said, oh, no, no, only I can do it. So I went to UCLA and I took a class from Eric. And Eric, the third night of class, met me at the break and said, I don't really want you to stay in class. I would like to write with you. And we partnered, and we were partners for quite a while, but until I started working with Richard. And Eric taught me a lesson about listening that has stayed with me to this day. It's a lesson that I learned and incorporated throughout my life, but also one I haven't yet learned. So I'm a real talker, and I just talk and talk and talk, and will talk to anybody about anything. And people come up to me, strangers come up to me and start talking to me because I'm very approachable because I love talking. And ever since I was a little girl, and my mom and dad could absolutely confirm this, people would tell me their secrets. Even when I was just really little, they'd share things with me, their hopes, their dreams, their anxieties, even their darkest secrets. And I would come home and I'd say, so and so told me they did this to their brother. And my parents would be like, where do you hear this stuff? And and um, you know, as I and it happened in seventh grade. And I know you're only 12 years old in seventh grade, but I will never forget this. I was in Mrs. Sharf's English class, and in seventh grade, there was a scandal in my junior high. It was my first year in junior high. And I had been working at the school paper, but they wouldn't give me any assignments because I was just a little seventh grader. But the scandal happened, and I started asking all these questions and going around talking to people about it. And I figured it out, and I wrote about it in the school newspaper, and I just loved it because I became this like star, and nobody could figure out, not the administration, anyone, how I got people to tell me what happened. And I did, and at first they didn't believe me, but it really was. And it got like this heady thing, but I got something wrong, and I got like reprimanded at school for getting one thing wrong. But I realized then that, I wanted to be a reporter because I could get stories that no one else could get. And, and I was really good at it. This was something like, look at all the attention I was getting, and I was only in seventh grade. So like that was the day I decided I wanted to be a reporter, and I never wavered. I like went to journalism school. I became, in high school, I was the editor-in-chief of my high school paper. I worked for something called Student News, where we anchored the news in LA. It was like, and I would get stories no one else would get. Um, and, and people would tell me these things. And it worked for a long, long time in my life. And after I got married and had kids, and I was working on my first screenplay, it was based on a true story. And Eric and I went to the hospital to interview this woman who was very, very sick with a heavy metal poisoning. She'd been poisoned by her husband, and she was dying of metal poisoning.
Wow.
And she was at City of Hope, and I was so prepared. I had researched it. I had lists and lists of questions, and I had all kinds of stuff. And I went in there, and we're interviewing her, and she's very sick, and I'm pushing her because I knew she was holding something back. And later we drove home, and Eric tells me, Michele, because he didn't really do the interview parts. He just was listening. He's such a good, quiet man listening. He says, you're so over-prepared, and you're so filled with questions, and you're so like knowledgeable already, but you just like aren't listening to what she's saying. So she shut down. And of course I was so insulted and very defensive and insulted. And we had about maybe 25 miles to drive home. And I'm like getting all upset. And about halfway over the 405, like coming from LA into the valley from UCLA, I got to really thinking about it. And I started to realize that Eric was really right, that when I'm uncomfortable with silences, I push my knowledge to fill those blanks. And I wasn't listening to her or giving her a chance to speak. It was really a profound moment in my life. And I got, and I thanked him for that. I was crying when we got to my house. He dropped me off. And I started to think about it that night. I stayed up. I remember being up all night long. And I got to thinking about all the ways that perhaps I wasn't really listening in my own life. From the little things like listening to our bodies when I was like eating too much and overeating. Was I listening to see if I was full? Was I listening to my parents, even to my kids, definitely to my spouse? And more importantly, was I not listening to what other people had to say about me? How do I explain that? Let's see. I remember all the times like at work when I'd shut down or grown defensive or disengaged or angry or impatient because people weren't seeing things the way I wanted. And I wanted them to steer it away, and I would steer it to the way I wanted the conversation to go, or how I wanted the outcome to go. And whenever I had conflicts in my life, I started to realize that a lot of that had to do because I was a big mouth and wasn't listening. So that was a very profound week. I thought about it a lot. I cried a lot about it. I mean, I was a young mom. I think I had a like 8-year-old and a 10-year-old at the time, and just I made a decision, and I remember thinking I wanted to become a better listener, and to really concentrate on what people are saying. And I decided I'd do it. I'd listen to everybody as if I was listening to my favorite song, or to my favorite actress doing a monologue, or to the favorite book on tape that I love. And I would listen like that really intently. And that one week, that drive home with Eric has changed my whole life in very profound ways, because I started to listen not just to content, but the feeling and meaning behind the content, which made me more of an empathetic listener, more of a heart rate listener instead of a head listener. And even though people had always shared their stories with me, even more they started to share their stories with me. I mean, I have a reputation now in Hollywood where there could be 20 people trying for the rights to a story, offering thousands and thousands of dollars. And my partner, Richard, will tell you I could get it for $1.99, because people know I'm really hearing them and listening to them. And I didn't do it, of course, to make money like that. I did it because I wanted to be a better partner and mother. And I remember when my marriage fell apart after 25 years, and and I was fighting to keep it and all. My ex-husband was a manic depressive, and he was so great when he was up, but so down when he was down. And I remember thinking, okay, what am I not hearing? And I finally had to let go of it, that it wasn't me. I was listening. And if I really listened, I was listening to him, and he was saying, I need to be alone now. So I've learned to listen more. Now, doing that made me a better person, a better friend, a better mother, but it also made me a much better writer and a much better journalist. Okay. So it really did change my life. Now, am I a great listener now? No. When I'm stressed and I fall into old patterns. You have these patterns in your life. I mean, this happened I would say it's about 30 years ago already, but because I'm 61, and no, probably about 25 years ago, this company. But, I'm a type A person. I'm talkative to a fault, always eager to jump in with my own opinion and to interrupt others, not because I'm rude. I'm really not a rude person, but because, I'm excited and I'm enthusiastic and I have something to say and I want to be an addition. And so I started to analyze myself about that. And I realized it's because in my family growing up, my brother was a bully, my dad was a bully. So I had to fight to get my voice heard. And but I'm making a conscious effort now when I fall into old patterns to pull back and listen, and to use the techniques that were taught to me so many years ago. Um, I came to realize over the years that listening is really the key to everything. And I think the majority of the problems in our world today, especially during the pandemic, are that people are really, really lonely. We have all these connections on Facebook, thousands of friends here, or we go on Zoom chats, or we meet strangers like you and I have, and we connect and all, but we're really incredibly lonely. And it's been like that. I mean, I got to see a girlfriend the other day for the first time in a year, because we went to wait in line for waiting list shots. I mean, standby shots. And we were both so happy. We were crying behind our masks because we want to connect, right? And and the pandemic's made it even worse, but because no matter how you connect online, we're just not really hearing each other. So I made a New Year's resolution, which kind of has to do a lot with this listening thing, that I was going to reach out to people every day, someone every day who lives alone, or someone every day who I haven't talked to in a long time ago, just to really connect. And when you ask somebody how they're doing now, and you take the time to listen, they just like fall apart. They open up and fall apart because we're not really doing that now. We're just also panicked and stressed and freaked out. So I was thinking about what to talk about today, and I came back to that this pandemic, we're falling away from our families, our communities, our synagogues, our churches, our neighbors, which is making us more divided and more lonely. And and then we connect more online, which leaves us more isolated because it's not really a cure. No matter if you get 1,000 likes or something, it's not the same for real connection. So I came back to this old lesson that only listening to people, real listening, hearing their stories, hearing their truths, hearing how bad it is for them and how lonely they are, that's our only chance to find meaning. And with that meaning, perhaps understanding. And then that got me thinking about, well, if we listen to each other with divided America, and I know everybody's all into radical listening now and empathetic listening. And I guess that's what I was practicing. But I think it's really hard to do. And I try to recommit it to it every day, but it's a very hard time to do that right now.
Well, listening is hard because I think remember as a young child, if I just sat there listening, my teachers, my parents wanted to know why I wasn't engaging, meaning, why aren't you responding? Well, I'm listening. I have to make sure that I have something to say. And then you get to a point where you realize, well, half of these people aren't making any sense, anyways. So I'll just throw in my 2 cents and maybe change the subject or say something to get a reaction. And I think that's what we've seen a lot of. um, I remember when I went back to school for my master's um, in 2012, my first reaction in communications was I was not really listening to the team that I was working with. And we were working online. And we would come up with a subject and all agree to do something, but we weren't hearing each other clearly. And I'm
Right.
a do it now person like you. I'm a type A. And if this assignment is due in 4 weeks, I'm going to do it now. And so even though I would say that to people, they still didn't get it. Okay. And yet others were saying, well, I'm so busy and, you'll be lucky if you get my assignment the day before it's due. And so I became agitated. I stopped listening. It was all about me. Um, And I realized after about 3 or 4 online classes, if I'm going to do well in communications, I have to shut up. I have to listen. If I don't understand, I have to ask the right questions. And I don't think there's anything wrong with asking questions. But as
Yeah.
kids, sometimes we're told not to ask too many questions.
It's interesting. An exercise I gave myself in listening when I started to do this is I try really hard when I'm out on an interview not to interject unless I need clarification. I was getting really good stuff that way, but it wasn't as good as I used to get because I realized that people like to open up when they hear your story too. So it became a balance, but also I wanted it to be natural. So I just had to be consciously aware of not falling into that old pattern of not hearing what was really being said to me, possibly because it was painful or I was defensive or I didn't want to hear what they were saying because it was too ugly. I go every summer to take Cheryl Strayed's class that she invites writers to up at Esalen, and she's really good. She's a great teacher, but she's also the best listener, and that's what's made her such a good writer. And And that's why when she did that book, Tiny Beautiful Things, which is really about empathetic listening, it was not just being a self-help guru. It was really listening and not judging and sharing. And she was brilliant at it. But, as I got to thinking, well, what could I share a lesson learned? I said, okay, I'll share this listening story with the caveat that, you know, it's the most important thing we can do, but yet, because listening allows us to hear other stories. And only when we hear other people's stories can we possibly understand other ideas, other histories and values, shared histories and values, different histories and values, um, what we have in common. Because I do believe that we have to have some things in common with the people on the right, even though I don't think it these days, but we have to. So, what we have in common is the ties that bind us. So, only through listening to their stories could I come to understand. In theory, I get that. And I've been going back and I've been trying to reprogram myself. I've been listening to TED Talks, to that guy from NYU. I can't remember his name right now, but who does all the radical listening talks. I've been um, listening to this one psychologist who she believes that we can reprogram our brains to not um, think of only our responses. And I've been listening to her. Really interesting stuff, because I am looking for a way to understand divided America. Um, but it's really hard for me. I want to scream at them. I want to say you're an idiot. I become very judgmental. I have to really pull myself back to the place. Well, what are they saying and what they're not saying? Where did they come from? How did they get here? And I do believe that's our only hope for the future. But practicing this lesson of listening is really hard right now.
Well, you know, I get, I understand how difficult it is. My brother happens to be one of our podcasters, and I maintain his website, and he blogs every day. And about 2 weeks ago, all of a sudden, it was like he was dropping off the face of the earth. Um, and he's done this in the past, um, but because we've gotten so much closer, I felt it right away. I knew there was something wrong. And I called him and I said, are you okay? And I knew what the answer was going to be. Oh yeah, I'm fine. And it was like, okay, um, you're fine, but we haven't podcasted in a couple weeks. Are you ready to come back? No, not ready. You haven't been writing your blogs, and you were really proud that you had gone over 500 days writing blogs. Anything I can do for you? No, I'm fine. But I knew what he was saying. He wanted to be left alone for a while. And that's exactly what I did. Um, we were brought up in a family that if we would have noticed something was wrong and we would have asked that question, my mother would say, just snap out of it. You know, there's something wrong, but just get over it. But I knew what he needed to do. And so I was sending him little tidbits every once in a while, saw this, thought you might like it. Um, you know, uh, the swearing in is on Wednesday. You must be smiling. And the funny part was that's when this all broke for him on Wednesday. Just
Broke for a lot of people.
and he is back to being his vibrant self and writing. And when I was younger, I wouldn't have listened like that. I would have been like my mother, just nagging, nagging to try to get it out.
Me too.
But sometimes you don't get the truth out when you do that either, you know?
Right.
But listening, just hearing what he was doing. And then I contacted my other brother and I said, you just maybe want to be on the sidelines here. Um, I don't want to, push our big brother, but something just isn't right. And he sent him some sort of cartoon. And the next thing I knew, you know, he was slowly coming out. And then all of a sudden on Wednesday, it was like, I'm back. Uh, so we do need to listen. Um, and, you're writing partner was so eloquent in showing that to you.
You said something really beautiful right now. Um, Not only did you listened to what he didn't say. You
Oh,
listened to his silences. And I find now, especially in writing, when you're writing about someone, to listening to what they don't say is so important. And I never learned how to do that until months after that conversation with Eric, when I really figured out and processed it all. And which is so weird because as a teenager growing up and you listen to rock and I love poets and I love you listen to what they say and you also listen to what they don't say and you analyze it and look at the metaphors. Why can't we do that within the real world? And since I've learned to do that, the meanings behind the meanings, the glimmers that you hear when you're really listening, it really that lesson really did change my life. I haven't talked to Eric in a long time, and I have to call him and tell him I did a podcast and talk to him about that lesson. Because I don't even know if he knows how much that changed me. So
and sometimes it's just that one little message that makes a big difference. So this happened when your kids were little, okay? And you said that you wanted to make this change because you wanted to be a better mother, okay? How did that help with your kids?
so my kids. I mean, this is not just a Jewish mom saying this. I have two brilliant kids. Benji has more talent in his little finger as a writer. He's a huge screenwriter now. He's doing 4 series and he's on his third big feature and he's so good. And Danny, who went undergraduate to Princeton, grad school to Harvard, graduated at the top with his MBA. He's one of the youngest studio executives and vice presidents and brilliant boys. But with me, Danny and I would butt heads all the time because he's very stubborn. We're very alike, actually, but he's way smarter than me. But everyone thought that Benji was like me, my older son, but really my younger son was like me. And we were both stubborn and we would butt heads. And I had to learn to listen to what he was saying before reacting to him. But more than that, I had to learn to choose my battles because some of them were just stupid and I just wanted to have them just because I didn't like something that was coming out of his mouth. Um, I had really good kids. I had really high expectations for them and they always lived up to them. But I realized now that, I realized much younger actually, that um, I had to explain what I wanted to them and they had to hear it and I had to hear their reasons for either wanting to do it or not. And when I started to treat them like children still, but as little adults and people that could understand, I was very close with them because of that. We were really close. And only I had a serious relationship after my divorce where I was engaged to this man who wound up being a monster. And the kids were really upset with me until I broke up with him and until I could hear their concerns. And once I started listening to them, I realized they were right and I got out of a horrible relationship. So I listen now. I listen with all of my being. And I don't necessarily agree, but I listen and I give it. And we're very close. I'm really close to them. And they would say now that we're closer than we've ever been because we listen really well to one.
And it's interesting that you bring that up because I have two sons as well. And my oldest son, when he was 11, went to move and lived with his dad. Um, and so our communication, you know, got disrupted. Um, and it took a very, very long time for us to finally talk to each other and not talk about the things that fractured our life, but the things
Good.
that were bringing us together. And he was a young adult at the time. And I'm grateful for that because, for so long, it was always, well, dad lets me do this, or typical divorce family, confrontation. And I would get upset, and I would take it out on him in words. But when I started listening to what he was saying, that yes, he wanted to talk to me. Yes, he wanted to be close. And it was like, okay, then let's forget all that garbage. Um, and my younger son, who was diagnosed on the spectrum when he was 6 years old, we listened to the doctors rather than listening to him. And if we had started listening to him like we did when he was turned 20,
Wow.
life would have been different. Uh, because he could tell us how he felt, but we were telling him for all those years how he felt. And what a difference it makes. And so I'm so glad that you used this subject today, because I think many of us are sitting around, um, going through the pandemic, um, whether it's having a conversation online, doing Zoom, being on the phone. If we're not listening, we're not getting the full value of that conversation. And
And so important now, more important than ever, because we have to really hear when people are cracking up. They are on their last, you know, they're just, I mean, it's really scary. When I heard Dr. Fauci the other day say that we're not going to be normal again till the fall, we're not going to have a summer in America again, I immediately went to, oh my God, my granddaughters didn't get to have birthday parties last year. It was just Gary and I. Um, Another year, it's not for all the kids in America are like that. Like, and I'm like freaking out. I mean, people are really losing it, and we have to listen to them and be there for them, even though we can't be there for them.
right. Absolutely. This was going to be the first year, and I can't tell you how many. I lost count. My brother's children, daughter, and her kids moved from the West Coast to be in upstate New York, and so that's an 8-hour drive from here. Not short, but bigger than much less than going cross country. So we had planned in September. Well, we're going to go up to New York for Thanksgiving. We're going to be with family for the first time. And as it kept getting closer and closer to Thanksgiving, we knew it wasn't going to happen. Um, and so we found other ways to communicate. Um, but it's difficult because my brother on the West Coast, I don't get to see him other than when we do a Zoom. And my brother on the East Coast and his family the same way. But we're not sitting around dwelling in that. We're making the best of it, which I'm hoping people who are listening to this will realize that that's what we have to do. We
And
have,
especially to all of your listeners that live alone. My heart for people who live alone now. I mean, the only thing worse would be if I was with my old fiance, who was the worst partner. I would have killed him and I would be in prison. But I mean, I'm with the right man now, and we can be together, and we get tired of each other, but we love each other, and we can be there. The people that live alone, like if I could tell everyone listening today, even if you haven't talked to someone in 5 years, if you know have friends that are living alone, use the pandemic now to reach out to them, not online, but on the telephone, to pick it up, or Zoom or FaceTime, to reach out to them and listen to what they have to say. Because, man, I don't know how they're doing it.
well, I know there are so many people who moved into whether it be assisted living or even independent living, but they are in a senior community. And even though they've got neighbors, they are alone because they aren't allowed to mingle.
Right.
Um,
My
and
parents.
yeah, and at least your parents have each other, but
Right. They
but
do.
but I know, like with Gary, that when you're with your spouse 24/7, 7 days a week, um, it's difficult. It's sometimes it feels as difficult as being alone. I wouldn't choose to be alone, but it's all difficult. And that's why these conversations are important, for us to understand that. We're all going through it together. But let's go back and think about what we've learned that it got us to today and how we can go forward living a happier life. And
So,
I've seen a big change in you since Wednesday as well. So I'm excited about that.
yes, yes. I mean, though it's so funny. I told Gary we were no longer going to watch 3 and 4 hours a night of news, and I got it down to two, but it's still too much. I know what's going on. I don't need to hear all this anymore, but I'm still, you know. But think
Well,
about all the things I'll be able to do in life again when I stop having 5 hours a day of news. I mean, I've lost so much time.
and I think most of us have, and I think the news is not like it was when you and I were growing up. The news, when at least when I was growing up, you know, they didn't show what side of the fence they were on. And so depending what channel I turn on, you know, oh, this is a good thing. And then
Well,
you
that's cable. You can still get straight news. You
well,
can do the nightly news. They don't have political bent. You
well,
can do that.
you are
And
right.
have you tried the News Nation yet? Out of
No,
Chicago, News Nation. It's out of Chicago. It's on I think CBS carries some of it, but News Nation is absolutely just the news, no commentary.
well, that's what I'm looking for as we move forward through this pandemic.
Google News Nation. Gary really likes it. I don't know, and Lester Holt isn't opinionated. He's straight down the middle.
Well, I will tell you, our local news stations are not. So, I mean, what
Right,
they're thinking.
right.
And there are days that I just like, oh, I just can't handle this. I know what I'm thinking. I just have to keep it to myself. So,
Yeah.
well,
Well,
go ahead.
I wanted to offer a lesson learned that I'm still learning. So that's the one. And I think it's important now because of the way the world is. So
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I'm glad you're getting back to work and doing something that you love to do. Um, and as soon as you have something, that we all can view, let us know because every time I watch something on TV now, I look for the credits. Uh,
it's
my
so cute.
brother was doing a lot of movie work with his music. I always had to stay to the end of the credits because that's where his name would be. So now I look for you and a few other people that
I'll
have.
tell you a funny story about writing that I was thinking about again today. Like every time, like it's been, I mean, except for an article for Vanity Fair and a little piece, really haven't written anything this year, just treatments and all. So now I'm going to do this pilot for ABC and I'm doing 2 new movies for Lifetime this year. But so I immediately said to Richard, my writing partner, I said, I can't write anymore. I'm a fake. It's like the emperor's new clothes. What, why am I writing? And he's like, you wrote some of the best pages. Whenever you haven't written in a long time, you think that. But it reminded me of a few years ago when I was at a Writers Guild, no, a DGA screening of Woody Allen's, I think one of his movies, and the one with the tennis. I don't remember what it was called, but someone asked him a question. Do you plan um, when you're going to write a comedy, when you're going to go more serious? And Woody Allen looks out with his glasses. He looks out at the audience that's full and he says, plan? I'm so grateful on any day when any words are on the paper. I just thank God. And everyone looked at him and we all just, oh my God, he gets writer's block too. And it was so great hearing that from him that whenever I go into, we immediately go into a negative place and think, I don't write. What? I've fooled everybody. I can't do. So, but yes, I'm so grateful to be back at work and so grateful that pages are coming and we really start on it next week and I can't wait. So
Well, we're excited for you.
thank
Thank you for the lessons learned. And, tell Gary I'd like some of those recipes that you talk about that he makes for you.
He
You
only makes one thing for me. I make everything for him.
everything. Now, did you bake the bread that you showed on?
Not yesterday's, but I am next week. My granddaughter is going to have a nanny challah baking lesson. So I'm very excited about, well, actually, I don't know that I'm excited about that because challah takes 3 steps and she's impatient like her grandma, but we'll see. But
Well,
we're going to do that. I like cooking with her, so that'll be fun. I do bake challah, but I didn't this week. I was too busy like trying to get standby shots, which didn't happen. So, all right.
hopefully you get it soon. You stay healthy.
You
And
too.
you too.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.